It's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about, but it's a terrible thing that's taking place. And farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me. But white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it.
I had a conversation with President Trump on the phone, and he said, "What's happening down there?" And I said, "President, what you've been told by those people who are opposed to transformation back home in South Africa is not true." And I added to him, I said, "We were well taught by Nelson Mandela and other iconic leaders like Oliver Tambo on how to continue to build a united nation."
I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So
Guys, so President Donald Trump has just responded to this whole thing about the whole Afrikaner move. As we saw yesterday, 2 days ago, 49 Afrikaners actually arrived in the US. President Trump was actually faced with the question about this whole case in the White House, I think probably after a meeting or so, as you could see in the video. And he's still really maintaining the fact that there's a genocide. He's still using the word genocide, that there's a genocide in South Africa, happening in South Africa. He's still using the word that there are farmers being killed in South Africa. And, still arguing that, he wants to stand up for the protection of these farmers because according to him, it lies in line with what the definitions of the refugee program in the US should be, which is a persecution, in this light. Although a lot of people have started coming out to argue that there are many political refugees from other parts of the world, all right, that have been seeking this refugee program in the US, but somehow that whole program was closed down, I think, from January 20th when he got sworn in as president of the US. But now the case of the Afrikaners is being really expedited, you see, and it's raising a lot of concerns. I even discovered that there's a church in the US, I think the Episcopal Church. I think it has a long relationship with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. I think this morning, yesterday they sent a communique to all their members that they would refuse to resettle these Afrikaners because of what they think are kind of like contradictions to the arguments of the fact that these Afrikaners are being persecuted in South Africa, and they see it as a moral injustice to resettle them, but then discard political refugees, for example, like from the Congo or from other really war-torn areas. And so this is where this whole argument is going now. And it's either somebody is not really telling the truth or someone is cooking something up, you see, because we could hear from my video yesterday when President Ramaphosa was asked this question at the Africa CEO Forum, where the CNN journalist from Kenya there, I usually like him a lot, Madowo, asked President Ramaphosa to give a comment about these 49 Afrikaners who have just left South Africa. And he argues from the perspective of the, resistance fight during apartheid, the likes of from the mandates of Nelson Mandela, former president, and Oliver Tambo, that they've been raised in a way to fight against racial injustice and transformation in South Africa in a certain way, and that he has chosen not to deviate from that way. Now that way, for example, is what many Afrikaners argue, and they are really warping the farm murders into that whole thing, that this transformation is crippling them, all right, that the transformation is crippling their ability to express their most profound fecundity, their most profound excellence to contribute to the system. And many of them couldn't take it anymore and had to resort to living the... So this is the argument, all right? And now roped into that is this whole killing with white farmers. And, as a result of this Episcopal Church that had this communique sent to all its members to really refuse resettling of the Afrikaners. I think I found a video where Aaron's Roots made a really shocking expose. I'll be making a full video on that one anyway, but they made it with a popular YouTuber, Tim Pool, where Aaron's Roots was actually breaking down very, very shocking question Tim Pool asked him. He was breaking down the official police statistics in South Africa on how white farmers are being tortured. And, for me, it was really scary, this description, Ansrud. Let's just quickly listen to Ansrud break some of these things down.
Well, I've read a lot of stories about these farm killings. The press in the United States, particularly right now, the Associated Press, when they ran a story saying what you need to know about these refugees, they said South Africa says there currently isn't a persecution of white people. And many of these outlets are saying that the farm killings are unrelated to land expropriation. So have there been any instances where white farmers were killed specifically because of their land, or how does that work? What's going on there?
So firstly, the farm killings, the problem with that is it happens so often, these attacks and the killing. So one way to measure it is if you, I actually wrote a book about this. It's called Kill the Boer. It's available on Amazon with more than 1,000 source references. So it took me 3 years to really study this phenomenon. One way to look at the numbers is to look at official police statistics. And over a period of 2 decades, that's about 20 years, according to the police data in South Africa, there were on average 2 farm attacks every day in South Africa, during which 2 people were murdered every week. And wow. So that's the extent of the crisis. And now the thing is, as I said, it happens so often that surely there would be cases that would be what some people describe as robbery gone wrong. Someone goes in to steal a television and then they get caught by the farmers. They thought maybe the house was empty. There's an outburst. There's some form of a scuffle and someone gets killed. And then these commentators are always very eager to point to such cases and say, well, this was robbery gone wrong, so there's no evidence of political motivation. When the fact is that there are many cases when there are, in fact, evidence of political motivation during these attacks. We see this, for example, with farm attacks where the attackers chant political slogans while attacking their victims, while torturing them in some cases. Wow. We've had the worst case was an elderly couple, an elderly woman and her daughter who was also an elderly lady. Both of them were severely tortured on a farm. And the attackers took the blood of the victims and wrote the slogan, "Kill the Boer," on the wall of the farmhouse with the blood of the victims. And so we have people literally writing "Kill the Boer" with the blood of the victims. And then we have politicians chanting "Kill the Boer" at political rallies. And then we have the Constitutional Court in South Africa saying, well, they don't see anything wrong with chanting "Kill the Boer." So it's very, very alarming. We have attackers using the names of politicians during these attacks, saying, like Julius Malema is the one guy who keeps chanting "Kill the Boer," one of the many at political rallies. And so we have had cases of the attackers chanting things like "Viva Malema, die white man," as they attack farmers. And so for someone like me, within the Afrikaner community, having grown up in an agricultural community, knowing many farmers, knowing people who have been murdered, knowing people who have been attacked and who survive, to read these kind of reports that are published in places like America by the media, but also in South Africa, trying to pretend that this is a non-issue, people should not be focusing on this. It's really bizarre. And we live in the era of offensive Olympics. Everyone tries to be the most offended by. Just imagine how offensive this is. If a member of your family, your father or your child or your mother or someone who's close to you was murdered during one of these attacks, and then you read in the New York Times, for example, that this is a non-issue, there's no political issue here, people should not be talking about this. What could be more offensive than that?
Yeah, so if you heard it now, so it's either somebody probably the likes of an Ernst Roots is not telling the truth, or the likes of a Donald Trump is being misinformed, or the likes of President Ramaphosa is not probably exposing some of these details. It's just so confusing, all right? But at the end of the day, we see in this video I'm going to play now, Donald Trump responding fiercely to this question from a journalist on his comments about the Afrikaners in South Africa that are going to be expedited and given a quick path to citizenship in the US, despite coming to the US as refugees and offering their, their services of protection to these people, and that more are going to be applying. I think this is only 49 out of, I think a video even said about 8,000 applications or thereabout. And so let's quickly listen to Donald Trump and then...
Refugees. I want to ask you about South African refugees. Dozens of Afrikaners who claim discrimination in their home country are heading to the United States,
right,
where your administration is going to welcome them as refugees. Now, this comes as you've halted virtually all refugee admissions for people fleeing famine and war from countries like Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Why are you creating an expedited path into the country for Afrikaners but not others?
Because they're being killed, and we don't want to see people be killed. Now, South Africa leadership is coming to see me, I understand, sometime next week. But it's a genocide that's taking place that you people don't want to write about. But it's a terrible thing that's taking place, and farmers are being killed. They happen to be white. But whether they're white or black makes no difference to me. But white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa. And the newspapers and the media, television media, doesn't even talk about it. If it were the other way around, they'd talk about it. That would be the only story they'd talk about. And I don't care who they are. I don't care about their race, their color. I don't care about their height, their weight. I don't care about anything. I just know that what's happening is terrible. I have people that live in South Africa. They say it's a terrible situation taking place. So we've essentially extended citizenship to those people to escape from that violence and come here. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what Donald Trump actually has to say. So now that we see that Donald Trump is still maintaining his position, and we know that President Ramaphosa and probably Ronald Lamola, who is Minister of Foreign Affairs in South Africa, they're making a trip to meet the President Trump, I think somewhere next week. I'll be really eagerly waiting for that meeting to really listen to the discussions and all that. Probably it might be another Zelensky moment. It's going to be an entertaining one. But one thing I think that is for sure is that it's going to be a heated meeting. And before that, I think it's really important that we continuously study and understand how President Ramaphosa and probably the ANC members articulate what is going on. So let's quickly listen again to President Ramaphosa's response to this question of what it is that the Afrikaners are trying to run away and escape from, to the point where that they have come to be uprooted from their country, where he is the president, still sitting president, yet they've been uprooted as refugees to the United States. And share your thoughts in the comments.
But I would be committing journalistic malpractice if I don't ask President Ramaphosa this. As we speak, 49 white Afrikaner refugees are on their way to the United States. They will be received by the government of President Trump. What is your reaction to this?
Well, we've raised our own concern because those people who are being enticed to go to the United States do not fit the definition of a refugee. A refugee is someone who has to leave their country out of fear of political persecution, religious persecution, or economic persecution. And
that's what the United States says they're undergoing in South Africa. That's why they've opened the door for them.
Yes, and they don't fit that bill. They don't fit that description. And I had a conversation with President Trump on the phone, and he said, what's happening down there? And I said, President, what you've been told by those people who are opposed to transformation back home in South Africa is not true. And I added to him, I said, we were well taught by Nelson Mandela and other iconic leaders like Oliver Tambo on how to continue to build a united nation out of the diverse groupings that we have in South Africa. We're the only country on the continent where the colonizers came to stay, and we have never driven them out of our country. So they are staying, and they're making great progress it's a fringe grouping that does not have a lot of support, that is anti-transformation and anti-change, that would actually prefer to see South Africa going back to apartheid type of policies. And I said to him, I would never do that. I learned at the feet of Nelson Mandela, and we intend to proceed with the implementation of our constitutional architecture. And I thought in my conversation with him early in the morning at 4 o'clock South African time, he understood that. And I said, I'd like to come and meet him so that we can discuss this matter further. So those people who have fled are not being persecuted, they are not being hounded, they are not being treated badly, and they are leaving ostensibly because they don't want to embrace the changes that are taking place in our country in accordance with our constitution. So we think that the American government has got the wrong end of the stick here, but we'll continue talking to them.
So a face-to-face meeting is coming up. Is Elon Musk invited when you have that face-to-face meeting?
Well, I don't know. They will determine whether Elon Musk is part of it or not. I will go with my own South African delegation.
Your Excellency, thank you so much, Your Excellencies. This has been wonderful. Thank you for your time.